Developing human rights policies and procedures. In order for an organization to prevent human rights violations and to safeguard against costly and time-consuming discrimination complaints, it is important to develop human rights policies and procedures that align with the organization's values and conform with Canadian and provincial human rights laws. The Human Rights Handbook for First Nations is a good place to start. Developed by the Canadian Human Rights Commission, it outlines step-by-step guidelines for creating policy and procedures for First Nations communities and organizations. This includes developing the following types of policies: an anti-harassment policy, an anti-discrimination policy, a duty to accommodate policy, a pregnancy and parental leave policy, a community-based dispute resolution policy. The Human Rights Handbook for First Nations advocates incorporating aspects of First Nations culture into human rights protection policies. Developing these policies benefit an organization in a number of ways: fostering an environment of respect for human rights, creating awareness of rights, roles, and responsibilities throughout the organization, and demonstrating that appropriate steps were taken to avoid discrimination. Training and communication play a big role in ensuring that your organization is aware of human rights policies. When human rights issues do arise, it is important to ensure that any information related to the complaint is documented, investigated, and dealt with in a fair and prescribed manner, in accordance with the community's culture, identity, traditions, language, and institutions. The community-based dispute resolution policy that the organization has developed will help with this. The Human Rights Handbook for First Nations outlines the steps required for escalating a dispute to the Human Rights Commission, along with guidelines on preparing an organizational response. The Canadian Human Rights Act includes a provision that requires the Commission, the Tribunal, and the courts to consider First Nations legal traditions and customary laws when applying the Act, as long as gender equality is respected. Thus, it is important to ensure that a First Nations organization's human rights protection policies incorporate aspects of the culture. The Canadian Human Rights Commission receives discrimination complaints, investigates, and will refer a case to the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal when they feel it is warranted. The tribunal conducts an inquiry into the complaint and either settles the complaint through mediation or a full hearing. The tribunal is the entity that decides on an appropriate remedy if they decide that discrimination did take place. The videos linked here may be helpful in learning more about how the entire process works.